My name is Laurie Pitts, and I'm the Programs and Services Director for Time Out Youth in Charlotte, North Carolina. Their kids are fabulous. They are, and they deserve the best in life, and they just aren't getting it. And it's not necessarily anything to do with their sexual orientation or gender identity. They're just fabulous kids like all other kids. There's no difference. We just don't pay attention to them. So we need to start listening to them and hearing what they have to say. Because they're the experts, not me. I don't know anything. Lgbtq homelessness in North Carolina. Well, officially there aren't any. There's no place for them to go and very few resources for them. There are no LGBTQ shelters anywhere in the area. In Charlotte, we have one youth shelter that has approximately 14 beds. None of those are reserved for LGBTQ youth, and it's difficult to get youth in there. And you have to be under the age of 18 to go to the shelter. So youth who are over the age of 18, there's nowhere specifically for them to go. We have an emergency housing program that we use volunteers. They open their homes to youth who have no place else to go. And they generally can stay with our volunteers indefinitely until they're able to save enough money or graduate from high school or get to a point where they can be independent on their own. The problem with that is that volunteers only want to take certain kinds of youth. So if you have any sort of criminal record, if you're in the midst of any sort of addiction, they don't get placed very long, just because volunteers don't want to take them. So these folks are all over Charlotte. Our homeless shelters aren't very safe for adults because they don't get the necessary training to work with gay and lesbian youth, much less trans youth, none at all there. So if you were born male, but you're female, you still have to go to the men's shelter, which is not safe. The only thing that we can do is call ahead of time and let them know to expect someone, and then we can talk to them when we drop them off, but I've only had one youth stay there more than one night. It's scary. I mean, it's a lot of sleeping in parks. We have youth who have been sexually assaulted in parks, on park benches, more than once, but there's just no place for them to go. So if something bad happens in one park, they go to a different one. There's just nothing. We have a couple of soup kitchens, but unless you're there at a certain time, you're just not getting in. And so it's hard for youth who, first of all, Charlotte doesn't have a reasonable public transportation system. So what would be like a 15-minute drive is a 2.5-hour trip on our public transit. There's no easily accessible public transportation. So it's hard for our youth to get to shelters on time, to get to soup kitchens on time, unless you know how it works. And a lot of our youth have been, they're from middle-class households, so they've never had to learn it. But all of a sudden, they have no place to go. They have to figure it out, but there's no one to teach you either. The public transportation bus drivers, and they don't like to work with people that they think are homeless, because what happens is they get on the bus and they just ride all the time because it's warm on the bus and dry, and they can only do that for so long before a bus driver kicks them off. We don't see it a whole lot because in the South, sex is particularly shameful no matter what kind it is, and so we don't get a lot of youth who engage in that behavior. They don't come to us. They don't seek us out. I would imagine it's just as prevalent as anywhere else. It's just not something that we see a whole lot. Self-harm. Probably about 85-90% of our youth have cut at some point or are currently cutting. I'd say the last 6 months, we have, not just in homeless youth, but in all of our youth. I don't know that there's been an increase in that behavior, but it's just an increase in the willingness to talk about it. Family reunification. I think there's a reason they're homeless. As an agency, we don't do any of that unless the youth asks us to. However, the homeless youth shelter that we have to refer youth who are under the age of 18 to, that's what they do. It's a temporary shelter. They can stay there for 2 weeks. During that time, they work with families to see if it's possible to go home. If not, they go directly into the foster system, which is worse. I don't know, honestly. I've spoken to youth who've had to do both. If they're able to work with parents to create a better environment for that youth, absolutely. And a lot of times what we've seen is it's sort of misunderstanding at first. And people don't know how to talk about this stuff. Parents don't know how to talk to their kids about it. Kids don't know how to talk to their parents about it. So, I mean, if it's possible and if it's healthy, then absolutely. Every kid wants to have a place where they feel at home. The kids that I've worked with that have gone into the foster care system still feel neglected. They're not getting a family, they're getting a place to stay, and that's different. Particularly if it's a family who has lots of foster kids or don't have experience working with LGBTQ youth. We do a lot of training of foster parents and that kind of stuff. But there's still a lot that don't have that training, and so they don't know what to do. They don't know how to help youth, our youth anyway. Advocacy. There needs to be comprehensive education about the LGBTQ population in general in every sort of educational setting. Our youth need to be learning about LGBTQ history and role models because they don't have it, so they don't really know what's possible. I mean, I'm a social worker, and nowhere in my education was there anything taught to me about working with LGBTQ people in general. And the same goes with counselors and doctors and nurses. Without common knowledge and understanding, our youth are never going to feel part of the whole. And that is made even worse if you're homeless. Part of feeling whole is having a place to go that feels safe. And our youth just don't have that. But I don't know what to do about it.